about to meet a woman who would have every reason to want revenge, to be consumed with grief and be filled with hatred. Tonight on the Inside Story, the most unlikely advocate for the mental health system. Avery.
Thank you, Gord. Triano Antidormi is a mother of 3 children. Only 2 of them are alive, but her first child, Zachary, lives on in his mom's now public quest to heal both survivors of violence and the mentally ill.
He was a bright, energetic, precocious, intelligent, friendly guy.
No one should ever have to describe their toddler in the past tense.
He loved his friends. He never got to go to school, but he loved the neighborhood kids.
Zachary Antidormi never got bigger than 2.5 years old. This news footage captures the lingering horror of that March day on Afton Avenue in Hamilton, when little Zachary was out for a wagon ride, stabbed to death by his neighbor, a woman who'd been harassing the family for years.
The police had been to our house a number of times. On one occasion, she was charged with assault, and we went to court, but it was thrown out. He told us to go home and get along like good neighbors, and then within months, she killed Zachary.
This chilling police confession shows a woman without remorse.
Okay. Now, you told me you had a knife.
Yes, I took
and
the
you
knife
told me you attacked. Did you attack with the knife? Did you use the knife to do the attack?
Yes.
The justice system found Lucia Piovesan not criminally responsible for the attack.
She was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia.
Boy, it's the rebirth of my son.
She had a son who died, and she believed that her son's spirit lived in Zachary. She believed that by killing Zachary and stabbing him, she would release the spirit of her son.
That was 17 years ago, and Piovesan is to this very day locked up in a mental hospital. And what Zachary's mom is doing now, all these years later, might surprise you, and it's been triggered by this. Triano Antidormi has become an outspoken and very unlikely critic of recent reforms to the Not Criminally Responsible Act.
I went public because I was pretty angry at the way that the government was stigmatizing people with mental illness. And I see the system doesn't serve victims, and it doesn't serve people with mental illness very well either.
She fears newly passed legislation will corral more mentally ill people into prisons instead of hospitals, and says it does nothing to prevent tragedies.
Bill C-14 would not have protected Zachary. In a lot of the high-profile cases, Vincent Lee, Mr. Kashkar, those deaths would have not been prevented with this act.
Triano Antidormi is a psychologist who now specializes in grief and trauma counseling. She says her own devastating loss is proof that the not criminally responsible defense is not about being soft on crime.
If they didn't opt for an NCR defense and my neighbor went to jail, she wouldn't have received treatment, and she could very well be out on the streets untreated.
Zachary should have been turning 20 years old this August.
Do you ever get past what happened?
No, you learn to live with it. You know, and you learn to that joy and pain coexist. And I have a lot of joy, but it doesn't take away Zachary's death. So we continue to honor his life.
And in honoring his life, his mom vows to continue speaking out in support of both victims and the mentally ill.
He must be giving me sort of some strength or direction, because otherwise, how would I be living if it wasn't for him sort of being that wind beneath my wings, you know?
Now, Lori has some really powerful things to say about revenge, about grief, about healing, as well as the major flaws that exist in trying to get help before tragedy strikes. In the raw portion of our interview is up on our website.
So Lori is a strong woman who believes that locking up people with mental issues is the wrong thing to do. It's not going to do anything to alleviate the problem. But at the same time, you can understand the outrage of Sergeant Ryan Russell's wife, when Richard Kashkar was declared not criminally responsible for the death of her husband. She, had to move out of the country. She's so angry.
I think you have to see that this is not getting away with something. When you're found to be not criminally responsible, if you're mentally ill, you weren't in your right mind when you did it, it doesn't mean that the term that you get is going to be less. It means that you go into a mental hospital. This woman has been in a mental hospital for 17 years. She will not get out. Had she been put in jail, she would possibly be out on bail by now.
The other point is Richard Kashkar is being allowed escorted visits into the community, and that's, got people very upset. But,
there's a
I
huge
understand.
conversation. This is such an interesting conversation, the conversation that we're having now, and it is a conversation that should continue because there are real questions about it. I think that hers is a perspective that shows great maturity on her behalf.
Sure does.
It really does.
Yeah.
And if you'd like to get involved in this conversation about changes to the not criminally responsible laws, I'd love to hear from you. I am on Twitter @CityAvery.
And the Inside Stories, runs every Tuesday and Thursday on City News. All segments are up on our website, citynews.ca.